Joining us now, the Chief of Staff for Governor Ralph Northam of Virginia, Clark Mercer. Clark, great to have you, sir.
Hey, thanks, John, for having me on. Good morning.
Always good to have you and get your perspective. And rather than speculate, go right to the source and get the truth. Now, Virginia Governor Northam extending his order shuttering non-essential businesses around the state to May 8th. He announced the 2-week extension yesterday. That was 8 days ahead of your April 28th original expiration. Tell us the thinking behind it and what the plan is.
Sure, John. Thanks, man, for having me on. Well, I'm feeling pretty pumped up this morning and good about the way Virginia has handled this and the way Virginians have responded thus far. And I'm very, very hopeful moving forward that we will be able, in a very thoughtful and common sense sort of way, to work with the business community to be able to get these businesses back up and running. And May 8th, I want to make sure we are clear about what that is and what that isn't. We never sought out to, in Virginia, articulate a list of every quote-unquote essential business under the sun. Other states did that, and I don't think it was, in lots of examples, handled well. We simply listed a set of non-essential businesses where there's a lot of physical interaction and gathering. The other non-essential businesses, John, your mom and pop stores, your toy store, the clothing store, those kind of shops have remained open this entire time, albeit, social distancing in place and limiting to crowds of 10 or less. So I was listening a little bit yesterday. You've been able to buy a flag and buy a seat and go out and get a handgun from the sporting goods shop all along. Those shops have never closed. It's the theaters, the restaurants, the massage parlors, the tattoo parlors, that it's just another 2 weeks. And the reason for that, John, is we want to make sure we work with and have the private sector lead the effort to get those types of businesses back open responsibly. This is not going to be something that the government can run on its own and run well. The folks that own those businesses, want to open responsibly, and they know their business is better than anyone under the sun. So we're reaching out to barbershop owners, brewery owners, restaurant owners. I was in touch with some folks that own gyms yesterday, and we're asking them, look, we're not out of the woods yet by any stretch of the imagination. Yesterday the governor reported 40 new deaths. We will be over 200 deaths today. We are very hopeful that we're bending the curve. It looks like we are, which is good, and that's because of what Virginians have done. But when we do have these businesses back open, we want to make sure they're back open responsibly. So that's not anywhere near an indefinite closure. It's not, August or something like that that I heard yesterday. It's 2 weeks, and it gives us time to get those non-essential businesses. The other ones that I talked about have been open the entire time, and I think the president today will, articulate some measures to responsibly reopen. I know he's focused on that as well, and has May 1st kind of circled as a date for areas where there really aren't, cases or folks feel safer about reopening. I think he'll probably note in other areas probably needs to be slower reopening. But we are kind of laser focused on this, and the governor, we had 2 meetings this morning before I got on the phone, and we were talking about these different businesses, and the governor was suggesting some names and making sure that we're pulling in the private sector to help lead us out of this.
Okay, so let me get this straight the way you're explaining it, Clark, and I appreciate your time today. As always, Clark Mercer with us, Chief of Staff, Governor Ralph Northam of Virginia. So May 8th is the date. It's only 2 weeks away. I've said from the beginning, it's 3 weeks from today, but I've said from the beginning, if we can open things up by the first week in May, almost every small business owner that I've talked to with the PPP and other things, they can survive through the first week in May. And I'm sure you factor this in coming up with May 8th, because you go beyond that, Clark, and disaster is going to strike. The level of bankruptcies is going to pop your eyes out. But on May 8th, the way I understand it, the way you've laid it out, just to get this straight, is that'll be the date when all businesses can reopen within certain guidelines. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, so that's a Friday, May 8th. And between now and then, John, we're not just going to wait till May 8th and and lay out everything we're thinking. The governor's going to articulate that between now and May 8th and make sure we're doing this in a responsible way. But the goal is certainly to get these businesses back up and running. And, John, I was listening to the founder of Home Depot the other night, certainly a very successful individual. And, he was talking about the fact that consumers need confidence. After 9/11, it's not like folks were excited to get back on a plane right away. And it took some confidence, the government putting out some general guidelines, but then the private sector really doing what they do best, which is leading by example to show consumers that, hey, we're ready for business and we're taking the appropriate steps. And I think those are really well taken points. I mean, I run a theater, John, as a side business. I've raised all the money to open that. I've got 4 full-time employees that we've been paying. I've watched all the savings we put into that business evaporate over this time. And we're going to have to convince the community that it's safe and appropriate to come back to a theater. And now, look, theaters were having trouble before coronavirus in terms of competing with home theaters and that sort of thing. But the point is, we need to make sure that over the next couple of weeks, we're putting out the guidelines and projecting that confidence that we're going to be able to open these businesses with responsibility. And those owners, I've talked to a brewery owner yesterday who had a lot of great ideas about how he can open his brewery and do so in a responsible fashion. So I'm pretty confident that over the next, few weeks, we're going to be able to get this right.
So, Clark, let me get this straight. So you're going to start putting out guidelines now. You've got 3 weeks, but it sounds like you guys realize with a small business, you can't just hit a switch on May 8th and everything is back to normal. People have to prepare to get their business open, get their people back if they've been furloughed or laid off, and things of that nature, figure out how they can operate successfully and profitably within the guidelines. So let's get to a couple of examples here so we can walk our audience through it. Okay, so let's say you're a hairstylist or a barber. Are you just going to be able to open up, or are there going to be certain restrictions like how many people can go in there at the same time, et cetera?
Yeah, well, all of this is kind of in process, but let's start with barbershops. And we've heard from a lot of barbers. And look, I think that's a great place to start for a couple of reasons. One, John, just from our general psyche as Virginians, getting our hair cut makes us feel a hell of a lot better. And folks want to go out and get their hair cut. So making sure that Virginians can do that, I think, has a disproportionate positive benefit to folks' psyche, right? That's just a general comment about barbershops. Yes, we've had barbers that, I think they're going to be using the masks and PPE. They're going to talk about how many folks they can have at their shop. They want to do this right. And we've had folks, and the governor has been talking directly to barbers I have that, look, these folks have put their life savings and dreams into their shops. And they don't want to endanger anyone's lives, but they want to be able to make sure their life's dream doesn't go away. So the work that you're doing, John, and obviously some of the folks calling in and the pressure, we hear it, and it's good to hear, and we need to hear it. But that's exactly the kind of parameters you talk about. Restaurants, I think I talked to North Carolina last night, the folks in their office. I'm going to talk to West Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky today and tomorrow. And I think everyone's kind of on the same page. It's occupancy, whether every table is full right away or whether we space things out a bit. I think getting used to wearing masks in public is a good thing. Some states are mandating by law that you have to wear a mask in public. I'll tell you, the governor saw an image, John, of a gentleman, African-American gentleman being pulled off a train and handcuffed because he wasn't wearing masks. And he said, I'm not doing that in Virginia. Virginians are listening. They're doing a good job. They certainly should be wearing masks. That's a common sense thing. But I don't want folks getting arrested if they're not wearing masks. We need to start getting used to it moving forward, wearing masks. I think teleworking, John, is a example. Folks have gotten, if they're able to telework, they've gotten used to it. And I think they should keep teleworking for a while if they're able to, and the businesses are able to successfully run. So it's going to be some common sense things. But barbershops and restaurants, those are two types of things. At the theaters, every other row full, making sure, John, one of the business owners made a suggestion yesterday that we've got, inspections by the health department to make sure businesses are rated and you can look it up and see if a business has an A rating or an F rating for their cleanliness. This is not going to be something we can pull off overnight, but if you're taking the kind of common sense precautions with wearing gloves and masks and, hand washing, perhaps moving forward that could be folded into how we look at whether businesses are responding well to this and giving folks confidence. So we're asking a lot of business owners for their input, and it's going to be common sense stuff that I think you just articulated with the example you gave about the barbershops.
All right, so let's get to, say, restaurants, bars. Are you looking at potentially, rather than have a 10-person minimum, I mean, that doesn't make any sense if you got a 3,000 square foot restaurant area. Are you going to do this by number of people per square foot or just keep it at 10? Because if you've got 3,000 square feet, 10 people actually lose more money if you open it up. Could you see yourself doing this on a square foot basis? Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, John. When the governor made the original announcements, I'll tell you, we tend to hear, John, I tend to get about 5 or 6 press releases sent to me after the governor's announcements, and half of them are from folks that don't think the governor's doing enough, that are elected officials, and the other half are from elected officials thinking he's doing too much. The restaurant one and the 10-person limit, you made it, you're exactly right. The corner restaurant, that 10 people is packed to the gills, doesn't make any sense. Versus the, Mike's American Grill up in Springfield is 4,000 square feet. And so that was a tough call off the bat. So we're going to be doing the exact, whether it's square foot or whether it's every other table or whether it's looking at occupancy. And I'll tell you, when we first came out with that announcement, John, we got the same feedback. It was you should have shuttered everything and you didn't do it quickly enough, or you should leave everything wide open, and kind of coming out with that formula at the height of this, John, and square footage, formulations, I think, was cleaner just to do it the way that the governor did at the beginning, but certainly moving forward, Mike's American Grill up in Fairfax can put a lot more people in than 10 and respect the social distancing, and will certainly accommodate the different size restaurants we have. That's a no-brainer. Well, maybe we can make May 8th a state holiday for 2020. It's going to be a lot of fun to just be able to get out. We're with Clark Mercer. I appreciate your coming out every week. Clark is the Chief of Staff for Governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam. Clark, I do want to point out a couple things. I know that whenever you do something, you've got two audiences. You've got those on the liberal left side that says, shut everything down, forget it. And they've got people like me that don't understand why we can't get back to work. So I understand. I really get the position that you're in. But I do have to tell you that the governor and your office has resisted the crazed draconian measures of some of these other governors, like Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, like the Republican governor, by the way, of Ohio. There's going to be rallies there. We can still buy plants. We can buy flowers. We can buy seed. We can go and visit our neighbor up the street. We can walk our dog 3 times. We can paint our house. And all of the things that you mentioned, all of those things put people in a good mood, which is why you mentioned that. That's why I brought up going to the salon or getting your hair
Well, John,
done. Put you in a good mood.
Let me speak to it real quickly. And I woke up today to 3 emails from 3 rural, very, very Republican legislators that are concerned about the lack of testing in their home region. 1 that represents kind of the Valley region, and then 2 from Southwest Virginia. So, and they're not jumping on. Look, we've been in touch with Republicans and Democrats. And look, there's some on both sides that like to sound off by press releases rather than pick up the phone and just give someone a call. But these folks were being discreet, and they were emailing their concerns, and we're going to have some updates, and this thing is going to continue to exist. It's not going to go away. We're going to continue to manage it responsibly. We were on a call, like I said, last night with North Carolina, and I was talking with them about, and I did with D.C. and Maryland the day before, about these regional compacts, John, that got rolled out in the Northeast and in the Western states, Oregon and California. Look, the point that I made on those calls was, look, we would like to know what other states are doing. Yes, obviously. There are some very big issues. Take Bristol, Virginia, and Bristol, Tennessee. We want to try to be consistent. That would be helpful. but we don't have an interest in forming these regional pacts and coming up with some clever name for what we call it, because, those became instantly political.
Right.
And whether that was the press making them instantly political or some of those governors wanting them to become instantly political, I'm not going to judge. I have my own thoughts, but they immediately became these states are doing this, and this is what they're saying about the president. President, why don't you respond to these comments they made? And it became a political thing. And we all agreed, look, we want to be aware of what we're doing. I was talking about the beaches down in North Carolina, and obviously we got beaches in Hampton Roads, and we want to try to be consistent. But the governor really has no interest in getting pulled into some political gamesmanship. The president wants what we want in this thing. He wants to be able to reopen responsibly. He knows full well that if you do it irresponsibly, all this good work that we've done, this painful work that we've done, we could be right back at the start. He doesn't want that. That's bad for Virginia. It's bad for America. It's bad for the president politically. All those same things. It's bad for Virginia and the governor as well. So, and the other thing, John, is, we're not Michigan or California, Oregon. We're home to the entire federal workforce. And John, I think your listeners, I've gotten calls from folks that are in the president's cabinet who live in Virginia, who share their feedback with me privately about decisions that are impacting their lives and their workers. So when we make a decision, it impacts the federal government. And we've got to coordinate best we can with the federal government. And, the governor can't get up at a press conference and report on what we're doing without getting a question, trying to pull him into this debate. And look, we'll have our political differences down the road, and we could talk about those, but I think he has tried to avoid making this a us versus them. I'm confident that the president and his team get it. They understand this, and they're doing the best they can to try to get us out of this.
All right. So, again, just so everybody knows, you have resisted the draconian measures of some of the other Democratic governors. You're also not giving checks to people that are here illegally like they are in the Golden Bear State, like Gavin Newsom is. So for all of our audience, I want to put things in perspective, right? There's a lot of governors doing things that are not being done in Virginia. You're also not wearing masks mandatory like Andrew Cuomo in New York did. You're suggesting them. And part of the reason of the psyche is, you go out every day, you put a mask on, it's depressing. So people should be able to do whatever what they think is going to be safe for them. So I agree with that. Let's get to beaches. Obviously, I live in Chesapeake, so I'm right near Virginia Beach. I got a lot of businesses that are petrified that if we don't get the beaches open in the summer, that they're gone. I mean, their business is over. They're going to lose everything they have. What's the governor's vision for Virginia beaches come the end of May?
Yeah, Memorial Day is obviously one of these dates that we're thinking hard about. The beaches, I'll be honest with you, John, it's tough. We didn't close all the beaches. Most of the states have closed all the beaches to anybody going out on them. And again, getting back to your psyche, you can go out with your wife and kids and walk on the beach, get some exercise. You can put a sand spike in and do a little surf fishing. I mean, I think fishing and hunting are two of the most primal things that man's ever done. When we talked about closing the beaches, it was let's obviously afford and look, practically speaking, you got to social distance if you're going to fish or all your lines get caught. I mean, there's some common sense things here. In terms of welcoming, look, we got April's usually the Pharrell's festival in Virginia Beach that brings 30 to 80,000 folks to the beach. We have got to think long and hard about how we responsibly open the beaches back up because, John, the worst thing we can do is have 30 or 40,000 folks sitting on Virginia Beach coming in from all sorts of states where there's these hot spots. And then if we've got another one of these massive breakouts and this curve starts over anew, it's going to drive everyone crazy, and it's going to piss off everyone that we went through this pain to do this. So we're thinking through it. I think that obviously the social distancing is going to be a must. I will tell you, in every state that I've talked to, beaches remain their number one issue to think through because just, John, by the very definition of summer in Virginia, in the South, you pack these beaches in tens of thousands of folks, and you sit there all day, you crack open some beers, and you hang out, and that really is prime breeding ground to share this virus. So I don't have a good answer for you right now. I will tell you it's something that we're thinking about and talking about every day.
Of course, DeSantis kept his beaches open for spring break in Florida, and nothing of what you talked about happened.
That's not accurate. I don't think DeSantis got a ton of great reviews from folks in Florida about how he handled that, but that's for, Governor DeSantis to handle. He's got Florida to worry about, so I won't, I'm not going to opine too much, but everything I've heard, I don't think it was, the reviews were not positive about how he handled that.
Are we going to be able to go to a high school football game in August?
Well, August would be a little early, right, for high school football to start. I mean, you got to start training camp in August, but late August, September, you start getting high school football, and I certainly hope, having coached high school sports and having two kids that ask me every day if they can get back to playing the sports that they like, I sure as heck hope so, John. And I think we're on track to have, schools open up in the fall. And I think you'll see, John, in the coming days, the states that haven't closed the schools for this school year, I would be very surprised if they don't make that decision.
All right, the only final thing I want to say is that we have 8.5 million people living in Virginia, Clark. 8.5 million, right? That's our state. Mm-hmm. So far, we've had, 200 people have died? Is that about accurate?
Yeah, a little over 200, yep. We've got 1,000
so
folks right now and a little over 500 in the ICU.
Right, so you've still got 5,000 ICU COVID-19 beds available. You got 200 people have died out of 8.5 million. If you look at the same time 12 months ago, if you take out those two nursing homes, you got about 120 people that have died. That number's almost on a par with the regular flu in 2018. So I'm just telling you, when people look at these numbers, they're like, okay, you take these two nursing homes out, Canterbury being one of them, and you take the other one out in Richmond, you got about 140 people that died. You got 8.5 million people in Virginia. That's about how many died in 2018-19 with the regular flu. And you have to understand, this is why you're getting pushback. And, also you got 5,000 hospital beds open for COVID-19, and you got hospitals laying people off because they can't do elective surgeries. So average people are looking at the science and the numbers, and it's hard to figure out, well, why are we destroying our economy when basically this is on a par in Virginia, at least with a regular flu?
Yeah,
just
John, let me
help me understand that.
Absolutely. Well, one, misinformation doesn't help. And yesterday you had a state senator on who spread up an absolute falsehood that the governor was going to close everything. Couldn't buy a flag, couldn't buy a gun until August. So never have closed anything, prevent anyone from buying flags or guns, and there was never any comment that someone was going to close the state till August. So that certainly would have made me irate if I was listening to your show and an elected official came on the line.
Where did Amanda come up with that?
I can't speak for where Amanda Chase gets her information and how she interprets it, and there's a number of things she says that sometimes I scratch my head about. We put our General Assembly members, John, on phone calls 2 or 3 times a week with members of our team, and we let them ask any question under the sun that they want, provide any input they want. I will tell you, a lot of the folks that we hear from by press release or that come on the radio have not asked a single question, have not made a single comment to the governor, to myself, or to our team. And then we hear these kind of comments, and we just say, wow, it would have been nice to have been asked that question. There is modeling, John, that very well we don't know a lot about this virus, John. Everyone assumed, John, that the virus might go away when it gets hot. You look around the world, John, at some pretty hot countries where this virus is doing quite well. So that's making us reconsider that this might not be a seasonal virus. And at least one of the models said, if you throw the light switch back on and completely ignore social distancing, and this thing gets hot again, then late summer you could see another big spike. And that's a fact. That's just a fact, and I don't think Virginians are going to do that. I assume Amanda heard that and thought, well, therefore, they're just going to shut everything down indefinitely, which is a very big leap to take. I'll be charitable and say that was just a bad interpretation of something she heard, and I'll just leave it at that. But John, the governor made the comment the other day, and look, the precautions we've put into place, John, are working. That's why the numbers aren't as bad as they could be, and that's a great thing. The worst thing, John, is we've done all this stuff and inflicted all this pain on small businesses, and the steps we have taken aren't working. I mean, how furious would everyone be? And the point the governor made, and look, he has run as a volunteer at hospice for 30 years, where his job is to go in and talk to children and their families of terminally ill kids and be there with them and their families to their, last days. And, he made the point about chemo treatment the other day and said, look, chemo treatment is very painful and it sucks. And the point of it is to get rid of cancer. And he said if a patient were to come in the middle of chemo treatment and say, hey, you know what, I see the chart and my cancer is going away and I hate this chemo, and I'm just going to stop it because you know what? The cancer is going away, so I don't need to do chemo. The point is the cancer would come back, and most often it would come back even more strongly than it did in the first place. And, that's a hard pill to swallow right now. And look, it's the middle of April. We've always talked about May being the time frame to start taking some logical steps to quote-unquote reopen. And I think Governor Cooper talks about not, switching the light switch from on to off, but it's a dimmer switch, and increasing that dimmer bit by bit until it's fully back on. I think that's a good visual to think about. But, John, the point is the stuff that we're doing is working, and that's a good thing, and the numbers reflect that. And if the numbers were horrible, then what we're doing isn't working, and we'd be even in a worse spot. So I think this is a tough spot right now because we're several weeks in, and we're seeing what it's done to the economy, and it's done it to Democratic-run states, it's done it to Republican-run states, it's done it to our entire country, so it's not a Democratic or Republican thing. And I'll just kind of wrap this thing up, John, by saying we were the number one state to do business in America by CNBC last year, and that's due to Democratic and Republican leadership. It's all of our leadership, and that's a good thing. And we're going to come out of this the best state in the country to do business. But the governor wants businesses thriving. It's good for Virginia, and if you want to talk about politics, it's good for everyone's politics in Virginia. So this notion that somehow, and I can't speak for other states or other elected officials, I can just speak for what I see and hear every day. We want businesses thriving. We've got some great business announcements that in the middle of this coronavirus, businesses have continued to move forward with expansion. We're going to announce those in the coming weeks and months. But, this is something everyone wants, and it's not political in Virginia. And I talked to the Republican leadership, and I got to give, our House Speaker, our Senate Majority Leader, Eileen Silvercorn, Dick Sass, a lot of credit. I got to give, Senator Norman and Delegate Gilbert credit. I was on the phone last week with Delegate Cox talking about some issues. Look, there may be some differences in opinion in terms of how this policy or that policy is handled, but largely these folks have approached us and said, let's get through this together. So.
All right. Well, three things I know you have to take off. Number one, just so everybody knows, this just in, another 5.2 million people filed for unemployment today, bringing the number up to 23 million. That's depression levels, so we have to get people back to work. I think, Clark, that you understand that. Second thing is, you're right, getting a job isn't red, it's not blue, it's not GOP, it's not them, it's your family. Number three is I appreciate the bipartisan attitude that you're taking because we all just, Clark, want to get back to work and get our businesses back. And as far as expanding businesses, we're going to get back. I just am in the middle of buying another radio station. We're going to continue to buy because people are selling in a panic, so you're going to buy. So I'm confident about getting this thing open. May 8th is certainly a reasonable date. The final thing I'm going to say is I've got to do a mea culpa here because I let Amanda Chase come on my show yesterday and really spread false information. And I didn't check it out. She's a state senator. She's running for governor. There's a certain amount of trust you have in people. It's not some crackpot calling in. I mean, she's a gubernatorial candidate, and she's a state senator in her second term. And she came on yesterday and basically spread false information. I own that because I didn't check it out. I didn't challenge it. So I apologize for that. Clark, Mercer,
hey,
thank
John,
you for your time.
one more thing real quickly. You'll see the flags. We've done this now, and Republicans and Democrats in the governor's mansion flying the flags at half-mast. Today's the 13th anniversary of the Virginia Tech shooting where 32 students and faculty died, and it's just a recognition of that, remembering those families. They're obviously continue to go through tough times and tough day today. So when you see the flags at half-mast for your listeners, that's why, and let's just have a moment of silence for them and think about them today. So thank you, John.
Clark, Mercer, Chief of Staff, Governor Ralph Northam, thank you for elaborating today and being with us. Senator Bill Stanley, 905. Keep it right here.